Good evening. In a little more than 48 hours, there have been 3 railroad tank car accidents in southeastern United States, and the latest came near Milan, Tennessee late this afternoon when more than 20 cars of a freight train went off the tracks. We have no reports of injury, but some of the tank cars are leaking chemicals and people nearby are being evacuated. Before dawn this morning, another derailment in Youngstown, Florida punctured a tank car, sending chlorine gas into the air and killing at least 8 people. More than 60 people are in the hospital, some of them in critical condition. Kenley Jones reports from Florida.
The train which derailed this time was a southbound freight of the Atlanta and St. Andrews Bay Railroad, a small line which operates between Dothan, Alabama and Panama City, Florida. A tank car carrying poisonous chlorine gas was ruptured in the wreck. A deadly mist of gas spread from the tank car. Motorists who were driving at night alongside the tracks were caught by surprise. Most of the victims who died were found in their cars along U.S. Highway 231.
I doubt if they realized what was happening, because this chlorine gas affects the respiratory system, the lungs. It paralyzes the lungs and cuts off the oxygen supply. They probably didn't realize what had happened to them.
Police set up roadblocks outside the town, and about 2,000 people were evacuated as special equipment and train wreck experts were sent in to begin the task of clearing the wreckage. Many residents will spend the night in National Guard Armory. About 60 people have been hospitalized. An investigator for the National Transportation Safety Board, who has looked at the wreckage, said it appears the accident was caused by a broken rail. The board is now investigating 3 major derailments in the southeast during the past week, 2 of which resulted in deaths. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Youngstown, Florida.
The death toll from Friday's propane tank car explosion in Waverly, Tennessee rose to 11 today. A second derailed tank car filled with that same deadly gas had to be drained before residents could return to their homes. Here is Jim Ruddle in Waverly.
2,500 of Waverly's residents were permitted to return to their homes today, and the extent of the destruction was apparent. The second propane car had been emptied during the night, and the gas moved out of town. The tank car that exploded on Friday had been ripped open on both ends, and the combination of the blast and the resulting fire demolished whatever stood nearby. Buildings were leveled, and the contents burned. Vehicles were smashed and charred. The Waverly fire chief died when this one was engulfed in flames. A home, which stood a short distance from the point of the blast, simply disappeared. Huge fragments of the exploded tank car were hurled through the air. One landed several hundred feet from the blast site and buried itself in the front yard of a home. The home escaped major damage, but houses on either side burned to the ground. Percy Coleman's home across the street lost only a few windows, and his 3 sons inside escaped serious injury.
Well, I think I'm extra lucky, considering everything, comparing what I seen at the hospital and the people I seen there when I walked in. I think I'm an extra lucky man.
In Waverly's churches today, the dead were mourned and thanks were given that the disaster was not worse. Jim Ruddle, NBC News, Waverly, Tennessee.
Thousands of trains go off the tracks every year. The latest fatal derailments are causing the federal government to pay more attention to the railroad beds. Jackson Bain has this report.
Last year, there were between 6,000 and 7,000 train derailments in the United States. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, the problem is not in the trains, but in the tracks they ride on. Many railroad tracks and beds were constructed nearly 100 years ago. They were designed for much lighter loads, and now they're deteriorating. Government officials are also worried about the increased traffic of explosive and toxic material on those rails, traffic which has doubled in the last 10 years. One member of the National Transportation Safety Board says the government has waited too long to correct the problem. Now, he says, it's a national disgrace.
The problem is not only that these terrible accidents occur in isolated areas. The big problem is going to be ultimately that we're going to have major accidents in highly populated areas. And it's just a question of what day it's going to take place.
The National Transportation Safety Board is expected to announce this week that it will begin hearings on derailments of hazardous material as a major national problem, instead of taking the accidents on a case-by-case basis. The move could lead to new and stronger regulatory action. Jackson Bain, NBC News, Washington.
And tomorrow in Washington, an antitrust trial begins before a judge at the Interstate Commerce Commission. On trial is the Seaboard Coastline, which runs the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, the road involved in Friday's explosion in Waverly, Tennessee. The Interstate Commerce Commission charges that monopolistic practices by Seaboard have resulted in deterioration of the tracks and road beds.
About 150 residents of the town of Cades in western Tennessee have been ordered to leave their homes for a second time this morning while workmen try to put derailed railroad cars back on their tracks. Included are a tanker that contains caustic lye and 2 empty liquid propane gas tankers. They are still considered to be dangerous, although empty. The derailment in Cades, Tennessee was one of 3 since last Friday that took 20 lives and injured at least 100 other persons. No one was hurt in Cades, but 80 miles to the east in Waverly, Tennessee, where propane gas tankers exploded on Friday, 12 people were killed. And yesterday at Youngstown, Florida, 8 people died. Kenley Jones has the story.
This was the 3rd major train derailment in the southeast during the past week. 2 of them, including this one, resulted in deaths. This time it was a southbound freight of the Atlanta and St. Andrews Bay Railroad, a small line which operates between Dothan, Alabama and Panama City, Florida. An investigator for the National Transportation Safety Board said the derailment apparently was caused by a broken track. When the train jumped the track, a tank car carrying poisonous chlorine gas was ruptured. The deadly gas spread like a blanket over nearby U.S. Highway 231. Motorists who were driving along the highway accounted for most of the deaths as a result of the wreck. Some of them were townspeople who heard the crash and drove their cars to the scene to investigate.
Well, I think it's about 1:30, somewhere around there. It was early this morning. I heard like a sonic boom, and it sounds similar like, you know, when they're dynamiting over there in the woods, you know, behind our trailer. So I just went back to sleep. I didn't pay that much attention to it, and I'm glad now I didn't, because I heard one of my neighbors are dead. They jumped in their car to run down and see what it was all about, and they're dead now.
Residents within 5 miles of the wreck were evacuated and given shelter in National Guard armories, while train wreck experts went about the tricky task of clearing the wreckage. Authorities hope residents will be able to return to their homes later today. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Youngstown, Florida.
The National Transportation Safety Board says there have been at least or between 6,000 and 7,000 railroad derailments in a year in the United States. Last Thursday, a full meeting of that board was called to review the matter. It is to be held, the meeting to be held in April. There are also demands this morning now for an investigation of the railroads by the Secretary of Transportation.
The Lee High School Generals are the new 4A state wrestling champions, and the Generals won the title with youth. 8 of the 12 General wrestlers are sophomores. That includes David Ralph, who won the individual title at 145 pounds, and his twin brother Dennis Ralph, who finished second at 155. Greg Johnson was another sophomore runner-up for Lee. In fact, Lee coach Joe Witt says he has never had a team so young and yet so good.
This team is the youngest team that we've had, and it's very, very talented. Beginning of the year, I felt real strong about the team. The only concern I had was their growth and maturity, how they would come along. You know, and the guys got a lot of heart and they worked real hard and stayed with us. And a young team on it, a very infant team. In reality, 9 sophomores. Tony Trimmer wrestled for us, but he had never wrestled for us before this year. And he came along and done just a fine job for us.
But Lee didn't do it all with youth. Trimble, the first-year senior, finished third in the heavyweight division. Jay Dobbins did not successfully defend his title at 185, but Dobbins still took the runner-up spot. And Elvis Chambers, a favorite at 132 pounds, was disqualified in the semifinals because of a controversial body slam. But Chambers wrestled back to third place. But Lee's best wrestler in the tournament was senior David Grant. Grant won the state title at 112 pounds last year. This season he moved up to 119 and took the title there, leading the tournament in total pins. But Grant still takes more pride in the team title.
Well, you know, we just went out there and got after what we said we were going to do. We just, you know, real team effort, real great team effort. We stayed together the whole weekend, you know, just everybody just band to one.
Lee is already talking about at least 2 more state titles. course, a lot can happen between now and next year, but Coach Joe Witt says he'll take a little time to enjoy this one. Dan O'Brien, WSFA TV Sports.
Well, you know, again, Phil, like I had a bad day today. I got up in West Virginia, and I had to go through snow to get to the car and the plane, had an emergency landing, and then I get home, and I get a call, and this is right before I'm getting ready to go, and I'm really not thinking about too much of what's happening, and I talked to some reporter, and I said, well, the question I asked was, well, you know, so what? So maybe somebody has my credit card number. You can steal those all the time. And I said, are you saying that I gave him? He said, no, I'm not saying that you gave the number. I said, well, then what's your point? What are you saying? And I think that's the essence of the whole thing. Now, I haven't read the article yet. Yeah, I haven't had time. I've been busy until, and haven't had a chance to look at it yet. I've heard the essence of the thing, with the fact that some of our athletes are allegedly supposed to be using my number. Well, you know, maybe they are, because it's easy to steal a number, and you could get it from any place. And once one person gives it, you know, he naturally would give it to everybody else. So, and I'm sure this has happened before and will happen again. Regardless of how well we try to do it, we cannot keep. Now, the question, though, the important issue here, Phil, is, and according to the NC2A, is the fact that did I give it? And I can tell you right now that I have never given my number to anyone, and there is no one that can say that I gave a number to an athlete. And there's no athlete will say that, and there's no one else. Now, the fact that he got my number, he could get it from a lot of places. He could get it easy through a collect call, or he could get it by overhearing me say something, or someone else could overhear me. It wouldn't necessarily have to be an athlete. It could be some student or some friend, and he could overhear it, or it's very easy to pick up. You could do it yourself if you wanted to find out a number. As a matter of fact, it must be easy, because obviously this reporter didn't get the number from me, so he had to get it from somebody. And if he got it, he was just like the rest of them. He had to steal the number from somebody, because he didn't get it from me. Now, maybe somebody else gave it to him, but he wasn't supposed to have it. And if he has the number, he got it like everybody else got it.
Here today in Auburn, Alabama. One street's one way here.
These are kids that maybe have been seen through mental health before on an outpatient basis, but they're children who need more intensive treatment than that. However, they're not severe enough to be, say, placed in a hospital. These are kids who are usually doing very poorly academically. They're having problems both at school and at home as far as getting along, say, with peers, being compliant with adults, staying on task. Some of the children have shown a lot of aggressive behaviors, such as fighting, acting out, destructive sorts of things. And they're children that just generally cannot be managed in a regular home environment.
Who is actually running Cemetery House?
Money, as I understand it, comes through the Social Security Act directly to the State Department of Pensions and Security. And then the State Department of Mental Health in turn contracts with them to provide services. Community mental health centers like the East Alabama Mental Health Center in turn contracts with state mental health to operate a program. So the money comes through Pensions and Security, through state mental health to our mental health center. Ordinarily, in most any kind of grant, and this is federal money, requires some local match. The local agency has to come up with some matching funds. And the local match, in this case, is being paid by the State Department of Mental Health, and that is one reason we're taking children from all over the state of Alabama rather than just children from Lee County.
Okay, my primary concern is for the kids that we have in public schools here. And what we've done is arrange with Auburn City Schools to have our children in the special ed classes that they have. And then what I do is I work with the children in school, and in addition to that I work with the teachers in trying to give them support and help in working with these children, because they already have a caseload of their own, and then we'll send a kid in. I go in as more or less an aide to the teacher. Then after we work with the children in school, in the afternoons we have educational time here where I work with the kids on their homework or on the basic skills that they need to make life in school a little bit easier, so that the teacher won't have that added extra child in there without the necessary backup. And like Deborah was talking about earlier, being a home, I'm just, an extra parent that helps with the schoolwork.
Do you find that the emotionally disturbed child is also usually coming up on the short end of the stick as far as his scholastic ability is concerned?
Right. I found that when I was teaching school, that most of the children that I had the most problems with came from homes where either the parents didn't have the ability to get involved in what the school was trying to do, or in some cases they didn't just altogether. But I have found that, generally speaking, kids who are emotionally disturbed and are having a hard time in school are primarily having that problem because of the emotional problems that they have.
Do you find it to be a sort of a vicious circle, that the emotional problem rolls into the academic problem and then it starts to snowball?
Right. It's if you can deal with giving the kid a chance to have success, if you can get him used to feeling successful about himself and feeling successful about school, then you have that reverse snowballing effect. He starts having a good experience in school, and the teacher becomes happy and the child becomes happy, and then instead of having the vicious cycle, you have a positive cycle of success.
Typically, how long will a child be here with you?
6 months is the approximate length of time that we've set up for a child to remain in the program. However, if we feel that a child is not ready to leave, say there is not placement for the child at that time, and we feel that he would benefit from staying longer, we will request services for him to be extended. Then again, say a child is here 3 months and we feel he's ready to go back into his natural environment, then that might be the case too.
I want to emphasize this is a voluntary program, that the parents voluntarily say, my child needs some special help. He's not getting something that I've not been able to provide him for whatever reason. Ideally, when we bring a child into a program like this, we want to begin immediately working with his family, either his natural family or his foster family, to begin to think about placement after he leaves.
The Hawks weren't supposed to be around this long. Birmingham Southern is ranked 12th nationally, and the Panthers were highly favored to win the entire tournament. But Huntington jumped out to a 16-4 lead, and Birmingham Southern never recovered in the first half. The Hawks hit 19 of 26 shots from the floor in the first 20 minutes. That's 73%. By halftime, Huntington already had 3 players in double figures and a 20-point lead. Forward Michael Provitt led the attack with 14 first-half points, and Huntington got plenty of scoring in the backcourt as Johnny Rogers and Jody Belser combined for 22. The second half was a different story, though. Birmingham Southern needed only 7 minutes to cut Huntington's 20-point lead to 8, but another 6 minutes passed and the Huntington lead was still 8 points. Southern got as close as 4 points with 3 minutes to play, but Rogers, Belser, and Terry Posey hit clutch free throws in the last minute, so the Huntington Hawks came out on top, 86-76. Rogers and Belser finished with 22 points apiece. Provitt added 21. In tournament action tonight, Alabama Huntsville meets Southern Benedictine at 6:30, followed by Huntington against Montevallo. Dan O'Brien, WSFA TV Sports.
Tennessee, caused by explosions in 2 derailed railroad cars containing propane. At least 140 people were injured, we are told, and civil defense officials were quoted as saying the number of dead could rise as high as 40. No one is sure, but it's a very big disaster. The explosion was so powerful it could be felt 3 miles away. Workmen were trying to transfer the propane from one tank car to trucks when it blew up and set off the blast in the other tank car. 3 blocks of the city of Waverly were badly damaged by this afternoon's explosions. Waverly has 6,000 people. They were evacuated today. There is still a 3rd tank car filled with propane near the scene of the other explosions, and this evening firefighters and rescue workers were struggling to keep that one from going up as well.
The second annual World of Wheels was a big success according to the program's promoters. The 2-day exhibit at Montgomery Civic Center featured a wide array of unusual and expensive cars, vans, and motorcycles. Entertainment was provided as well as a free movie, Gone in 60 Seconds. This custom van had everything but the kitchen sink, and this vehicle, called the Pizza Wagon, was among the more unusual cars at the show. Several awards were given out to the top autos, including this one, which was voted the most popular by the spectators. The talk of a fuel shortage doesn't seem to bother custom car owners. They say if they can't drive them, they'll show them. This is Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV News, reporting.
To left.
What is this for the dudes on the field? I'm going for it. Two times.
Get to the first baseman. Double relay, man, it's out in first.
It ain't only the money that we're looking for, but it's to get the Department of Agriculture to get off the butts and go ahead and get our farm program out.
Farmers have found themselves between a rock and a hard place. The push of cold winters, hot, dry summers, pests, and more has come to shove on the streets and in the halls of government. Tuesday night at 6:30, Channel 12 presents a WSFA TV News special report, Farming, Harvest of Diminishing Return.
Farming, I believe, is the backbone of this nation. And the backbone is either broke or at best it's badly bent.
The nation's farmers are pushing government for help. Farm strikers and non-strikers are asking for agricultural reform. While government is responding, it has not yet been what most farmers want. Tuesday night at 6:30, Channel 12 presents a WSFA TV News special report, Farming, Harvest of Diminishing Return.
The lead bill has been successful in passing the House before. Today it was placed at the top of a special order calendar adopted by the Rules Committee after its chairman said the administration had asked that the special order be limited to lead measures. The special order was amended in the House to include an ABC revenue distribution formula and TVA fee bills. The first of the added measures by Representative Dewey White of Birmingham would require that any increase in revenue from the state liquor tax at the end of this year be given to only wet counties in the state. Currently, the revenue is given to all 67 counties. The other House bill by Representative Frank Reddick from Huntsville would distribute to 16 North Alabama counties served by TVA all revenue from fees paid to the state by TVA in excess of $20 million. Under current procedures, all TVA fees, which are expected to total just under $20 million this year, are deposited in the state's general fund. The lead bill, meanwhile, offered much debate. The substitute measure would impose a 20% ceiling on increases in ad valorem tax revenue received by a county in connection with statewide property reappraisals. Any revenue increases above that amount would have to be rolled back by an across-the-board reduction in the county's millage rate. Other bills on the calendar affecting property taxing and offered by Representative Rick Manley of Demopolis would increase the state homestead exemption from $2,000 to $3,000. Another would change the basis for land appraisals from the best use to current use. And a fourth measure would lower the assessment ratio for residential property, farmland, and timberland from 15% to 10% in Houston and Mobile counties, and lower the ratio for primarily business property from 25 to 20% in Mobile County alone. The House has passed a lead bill twice before since it was first introduced in 1975. Taking the microphone at the outset of the House debate, Manley urged speedy passage of the lead bill and the companion measures. After more than 3 hours of debate, the House passed the third lead bill property tax measure in as many years. The vote was 77 to 22, and it was sent on to the Senate for consideration. The proposed constitutional amendment to exempt property taxes on farm machinery and equipment was included in the bill. There were dozens of other amendments offered to the bill, but they were turned back. The Senate, meanwhile, dropped its talkathon on the bill creating a state utility czar, but before it adjourned until Thursday morning, it began another filibuster on a bill to expand the Public Service Commission from 3 to 5 members. All of the members would be appointed by the governor. The Senate also turned back a special order calendar. From the state legislature, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
The attacker of Lula Mae Carter must have thought she would be in Lister Hill Hospital for some time. She was not. She was treated and released and went home. For the same attacker, fitting the same description, driving the same car, tried to break into Lula Mae Carter's home. That attack was foiled by Mrs. Carter's brother, Rayford Weeks. Weeks drove off the housebreaker in a hail of bullets. Montgomery County District Attorney Jimmy Evans went to Hamilton to talk to Mrs. Carter about the attack, and he explains what the police reports indicate.
As I understand it, well, to begin with, we caused a subpoena to be issued for this lady, compelling her to come to Montgomery and to answer some questions. She came, and on Monday, the 27th of February, she returned the next day not in the custody, but accompanied by a district attorney investigator out of our office. And district attorney's investigator returned home. Last night we got a call that she'd been severely beaten. So I came up today to look at it, and as I understand it, everything's a little sketchy, I understand, but based on the information that I've received thus far, and our office along with the Alabama Bureau of Investigation is still investigating it, But as I understand it, she was driving on this road here and was going home when someone in a ski mask lunged out at her car, and she became afraid that she might run over that person. She didn't know at that time he had on a ski mask, and it was dark, and she slammed on the brakes. But when she did that, he ran around and jerked out of the car and kicked her and beat her. She has lacerations, cuts about the face and body, and has some cracked ribs, and we understand her spleen has been damaged. And then another automobile pulled up to the scene where she was being beaten, where the attacker got in the other car, and they drove off. That's all we know at this point.
In the statement she's given police, did she say anything about the attack?
Yes, she commented to me on some of the words that was used to her, which I'm not at liberty at this point to talk about. Some of the things that it was said to her after the attack.
Mrs. Lula Mae Carter operates the restaurant in the Hamilton Holiday Motel. This is the motel where many of the meetings concerning a theme park, Stars Over Alabama, were held. And it's what Mrs. Carter knows about that project and a possible arson at the park and meetings of members of the park organizers, including Melbatil Allen, that the grand jury wants to know. And obviously what she knows, there's someone who doesn't want her to tell. Clark Edwards, WSFA TV News in Hamilton, Alabama.
The council's decision followed almost 2.5 hours of a public hearing. That hearing was called for by Council President Willie Peake when he introduced the ordinance last week. More than 100 persons crowded into the council chambers for the hearing. Much of the concern by the fluoridation opponents was centered around the dangers of sodium fluoride, the chemical which will be used in the process. One man called it a highly toxic chemical which the body can't metabolize. However, a local dentist and physician attempted to dispel that claim, saying sodium fluoride is no more dangerous than the air that we breathe or the salt on our tables. But not everyone was convinced.
I have a glass here and I have a spoon. And I'll let you look at some sodium fluoride. And here it is. Now I'll put a spoonful in that glass, and we fill it up with water. And if you people don't think it's poison back there, I'll give anybody $500 if you'll come up here and drink that glass of water and hold it for 5 minutes.
We're advocating this because it is a safe measure. There are 100 million people in this country drinking fluoridated water, and there has yet to be a substantiated case of anyone having ever been harmed by fluoridated water in the concentrations being recommended.
Another concern expressed at the hearing was the manner in which the fluoride would be put into the water system. Construction engineer for the state water supply system, Blake Jeffcoat, assured the council the state would make sure every safety precaution was taken at all times. And at the local level, George Bryant, the supervising engineer for the city waterworks, explained his role in monitoring the process.
We would make a chemical analysis of the water that's in the two well areas every 8 hours, and we would determine the difference between the amount that's in there and the optimal amount, which is 1 part per million. And the only part that would be added would be the amount to bring it up to that amount that is required.
At the end of the hearing, most of the council members' minds appear to be made up. But just in case, President Peake made one last pro-fluoridation pitch.
Being aware of the last presentation of an ordinance to fluoridate the city water, some of the things that would be said, like it would be poison, communist plot, mass medication, forced medication, fatal side effects. The telephone call I had today, a nice lady told me that the difference between myself and Hitler was that he used the gas chamber and I'm using fluoridation. Another hearing has been held. I think it's now time for the council to decide what to do with the ordinance. Approve, disapprove, or table. I ask the council to use the information that has been presented and other information that it has at its disposal to make its decision. I urge you to vote yes, as I will do on this ordinance.
Although the positive vote wasn't too surprising to most people, the unanimous vote was. As for the opposition's next step, there's been no word thus far. Court action is a possibility. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, City Hall.
According to informed sources, the attempts to get grand jury documents pertaining to the Allen case began several weeks ago. More than one person was approached to steal the documents, and large sums of money were offered for those documents. We've been told that tape recordings will be an important part of the prosecution of Pennington. This is the story from what we've been able to piece together from documents and reliable sources. The 45-year-old Pennington began his alleged attempt to both steal Allen grand jury testimony and gain smear information against District Attorney James Evans several weeks ago. It is also reported by sources that the Nashville educator was placed under surveillance early in his quest for grand jury records. Dr. Pennington is known to be on police taped recordings telling of huge sums of cash available for what he allegedly wanted. After first approaching a radio news reporter who then notified the DA who provided an undercover officer, Pennington was arrested at this East Side motel last night. We are told that that transaction last night was recorded using a taping device worn by Mrs. June Henley, an employee of the District Attorney's office. We asked the District Attorney about all aspects of the case. Was Byron J. Pennington sent here to Montgomery County to secure grand jury testimony pertaining to State Treasurer Melba Till Allen by people who may have organized crime ties?
I wouldn't want to comment on that other than to say Ms. Allen has expressed a concern about organized crime in some of her public statements. I too share that concern, and other than that, I wouldn't want to say anything about where they came from or who sent them or who they were connected with.
Mr. DA, we've learned that the name Carlos Marcellos, a reputed mafia figure in Louisiana, his name has constantly come up in grand jury testimony here pertaining to the Allen case. Was Mr. Pennington sent here by Marcellos or people associated with Mr. Marcellos?
Norman, I don't know a thing in the world about Mr. Carlos Marcellos, except what I read in the Reader's Digest issue. They talk about several people from the New Orleans area in that issue, and of course I know the rumors and the innuendos that go around about Mr. Marcellos. I wouldn't want to comment about his connections and anything that might have been said about him in the grand jury.
I understand that Mr. Pennington was leading an effort to smear you personally in an effort to take some heat off the Allen case in terms of getting some pictures of you with women, getting some pictures with you smoking marijuana. Could you tell us about that?
Well, I don't want to get into that because what he wants to do to me is not important. What is important is the law be enforced.
Mrs. Allen said today that she was surprised and shocked over the charges against Pennington and that the accusations were strictly out of character for the Nashville, Tennessee man. She also said that he is still innocent until proven guilty of the charges.
Well, what we're trying to do is to move CETA back where it was a few years ago, or at least where it should have been when it started, and that is to deal with people who are unemployed and underemployed, try and provide them with some skill training, upgrading, and allow them to enter the world of work. And what we've seen happen over the years is that the program has been used because it's been out there as the vehicle for a lot of other programs, public service jobs and a number of other things. What we want to do is to get it back to its original intention, to emphasize the training aspect of it, to try and deal with the structurally unemployed, and at the same time deal with the cyclically unemployed who need jobs. Really, they have some skills, but there are no jobs in their community, and provide those jobs through a public service program, but at the same time try and get back to that training aspect.
What is the general feeling on Capitol Hill about the bill?
I think we're going to see it passed. I'm sure it'll be with some change. I'm not yet sure where the change will be. We just got the bill last week, and from the White House. It's pretty much the same thrust as Congressman Hawkins, who's the chairman of my committee, and myself have been working on over the last several months. I think we'll take that, we'll use it as the vehicle, and then hold some hearings and see where we might want to make some changes. Well, we've got to do that within the next couple of months.
Where do you foresee the CETA program will go? How far will it go?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by how far will it go. It will end up being about an $11 billion program, which is certainly a great deal of money. But we don't really want it to end up as a program, at least in the countercyclical part of it that is simply a place for make-work jobs. We want to make sure that the thing really works, and especially with the structural portion of it, that we are really training people for relevant jobs and that they can get out there and become a part of the world of work.
A standing room only crowd jammed the council chambers, some to speak for or against fluoridation, while others were intent to sit and absorb the testimony from experts as well as homemakers. Much of the comment concerned the alleged harmful effects of fluoride. Some opponents claimed sodium fluoride is a highly toxic chemical which the human body cannot metabolize. But a Montgomery dentist attempted to dispel that claim, saying it's no more a poison than the air that we breathe or the salt on our tables. While most persons speaking at the hearing were serious in their claims, at least one managed to get a few nervous laughs.
I have a glass here and I have a spoon. And I'll let you look at some sodium fluoride. And here it is. Now I'll put a spoonful in that glass, and we fill it up with water. And if you people don't think it's poison back there, I'll give anybody $500 if he'll come up here and drink that glass of water and hold it for 5 minutes.
We're advocating this because it is a safe measure. There are 100 million people in this country drinking fluoridated water, and there has yet to be a substantiated case of anyone having ever been harmed by fluoridated water in the concentrations being recommended.
I'm amazed at the ordinance that you have prepared here. No one accepts the blame in any place on here for people who are allergic to fluoride. And I happen to be one of those. And I talked with your president, Mr. Peake, over the phone. We discussed it. 12 years ago, we had the opportunity in a democratic way to express our views about fluoridation. He was for it then, still is. I was against it then, I still am.
It's not known just how long it will take to adapt the city's water system to the new process, but in other cities in similar situations, opponents have attempted to block fluoridation through the courts. There hasn't been any word yet on that possibility in Montgomery. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, City Hall.